I think it's that hiding, and the flip side to that is it's creating children who aren't curious. And I think curiosity for young people is the greatest gift that a great education can give children, because
Yeah.
if children know, when children don't know something, if they believe that they can figure it out, they can do anything. To your point, if they don't know something and they're embarrassed by it, or they think of themselves as less than, right? That's just one more like shame wall. It's like, oh, I don't know that. And so if they're confident in themselves and curious and can say, wait, I don't understand that, that's really different than knowing they don't know something and being and trying to hide it.
So welcome back to Tomo Club podcast series. I'm Avinash Bansal, co-founder at Tomo Club. And today we have a head of school from Oak Knoll Montessori School, Allwyn Fitzpatrick. And the today's topic of discussion is what if cross-age mentorship programs shaped leadership skills for all? And I think I'm a big believer of peer-to-peer learning, also cross-age learning. So I am all in to talk about this podcast. But before that, welcome to the podcast, Alvin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Same here. So Alvin, I always start my podcast by asking people, give us a snapshot of your journey. You know, what got you excited about education in the first place, and if that reason's still valid after so many years.
Yeah. I come from a big family of educators. My parents were both teachers. My dad was the head of school. My aunts, uncles. And it's interesting because when I was a child, especially a teenager, the thing I would tell everyone that I was never going to be was a teacher or anything involved in education. So it was after I got finished with college, and I was a student athlete, and I was trying to decide what my next step was going to be. And I started assisting my mom in an elementary Montessori classroom. And then I also started the theater production at that school that my parents founded. And then the Montessori training for elementary was opening up in San Diego. And so if I'm being honest, it was really just something to do to get my parents off my back of like, what are you going to do with your life? And I figured I would teach for a couple of years while I figured that out. And then, I've taught 6 to 9 year olds, 9 to 12, and 12 to 15 year olds. And I quickly fell in love with the work, and I've stayed with it for so long because I truly believe like I have the best job in the world, that I get to be around children who have these incredible moments every day, and I'm lucky enough to witness that. And so it's what I think keeps me humble and really driven to keep going.
Why do I sense your parents ran a scheme? They knew that,
It's true. Yeah, that's true. Actually, they knew me even then. Like the reverse psychology would work. But yes, because my sister is very much involved in education as well, and my brother too. So they clearly they are. They're running a big scheme. And my son though has made it very clear that he is not going into the world of academia.
well,
So we'll see.
he should not make tall claims.
I know exactly.
The blood will, come.
Yeah, it's true. He's graduating from college next year, and he's like, well, maybe I will be a history professor. I'm like, see, it can happen.
Crazy. That's insane. And I would say congratulations to your entire family. I think
Oh, thank
might
you.
have directly or indirectly impacted so many lives that it's insane. Like I
Yeah,
have been a teacher, and I did it for a short stint. And even then I share such connections with those students. I
yeah.
imagine people doing it for 20, 30 years. That's insane.
It's true. I mean, many of my first students now are having children or have had children and are married, and they're, excited to tell me what Montessori school they're going to. And one's actually going to come next year to this school. So
Mhm.
it's crazy how much you don't think about that impact until
Yeah.
later on in your life, where those students come back and have such fond memories of the time spent with you.
Oh, absolutely. So now coming to
Yeah.
the topic of discussion today about
Yeah.
age mentorship. So first, I would love to understand that. So Montessori education has always focused on independence, right, and empathy,
Hmm.
and more like you experience the environment around it to learn. And
Yes.
all these values, they feel timeless to me, honestly, but
Hmm.
very urgent right now. So in your
Yes.
view, what makes Montessori model still so relevant in the world that's changing faster than ever?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've been doing Montessori admissions for like the last 10 years of my career. And what you're saying, I'm not sure if it's where the world is right now in terms of our leadership and our what's happening in the world. Um, but so many people on tours that I give every week have just talked openly about how they're seeking a Montessori education because the values that are embodied within it are the same values that they want their children to have when they go out into the world. And I think when I was giving a tour yesterday, for instance, there's a 3-year-old boy who just started in one of the primary classrooms, and one of the 5-year-old boys was giving him a tour of the classroom and showing him where the snack table was and how beautiful all the plants were. And at the end of that little tour that this one older boy was giving the younger boy looked up at him and just gave him the longest hug. And
Mhm.
then the parents of the youngest boy emailed me last night to tell me that their son, when he was getting ready for bed, thanked them for taking him to this school because he has so many friends now and he feels like he has the best friends in the world. And his parents said that they both cried and went to bed with their hearts so happy. And I think for parents that seems really relevant because it is, but I also think that it's relevant because it doesn't necessarily happen in many schools where social and emotional learning is just something that has always happened in Montessori schools. And I feel like traditional education is now realizing that children need to feel safe and seen and heard at school in order for them to learn. And so I think as this world continues to evolve at a pace that is incredibly fast, and we don't know what the world is going to necessarily look like in 5 years, I would challenge anyone to try and tell me that humans don't need to be kind and empathetic people that help each other and seek out those who help others. And it's grace and courtesy is the foundation of any Montessori classroom,
Yeah.
and it's something that I think right now especially is really relevant and people are noticing, and it's become very important to people.
No, I agree every word you said, especially in the age of AI. People are
Yeah.
definitely gonna fall back on the importance of life skills more than ever.
Yes.
And because especially when so many things can get automated or even better presented with AI, how will
Yes.
how will you keep your individuality intact will become
Yes.
next level challenge. And
Yeah, exactly.
these human skills will actually needs to be imbibed. And we all know, right? The elementary is so early age is so impressionable that it
Yes.
like literally put the path for the next middle school and high school and even college. So I think that's why even before we started talking, I was like, I am exploring Bradbury. So it is.
Yes, I mean, it's really fun to think about and then to feel good that I'm in this bubble, if you will. And then it's also my vision and hope that the bubble can expand because it was Montessori's vision. I mean, not many people know that Dr. Maria Montessori was a person and she worked all over the world. But at the end
Yeah.
of her life, she was working in India and all around Europe. And that was her ultimate goal. And she believed that she could create or influence world peace because if enough children were educated in this manner, where you grow to, where you learn to appreciate everything that has come before you, not just humans,
Mhm.
just any life, anything, work,
Yeah.
um, she called it cosmic agents of good, that if those people go out in the world and influence others, that eventually it would be like it would be like COVID, but in a good way of like it would
Yeah.
spread. And I think diehard Montessorians, we do hold on to that because it is woo woo thinking, and maybe it is magical thinking, but it also I know that in my life and in all the students that I've taught, I personally feel really good about who those humans are in the world. And I'm just one person. You know, when I talk to so many other teachers who have similar situations and have similar relationships with their former students, they also feel that way. And so it is good to know that in where we are right now in humanity and the history of the world, there's also so much good happening in terms of humans being educated in a way that really expects young people and respects young people enough to hold them accountable for being kind, empathetic, nurturing human beings.
No, absolutely. Even I think there has been an explosion of parenting bloggers all over the world, which has definitely accelerated the Montessori movement further.
Yes.
Because, like, right from the birth, or even before that, in the pregnancy phase, the content that has been, in a way, presented to us is talking more about gentle parenting and more talking about
Mm-hmm.
respect the kids as an individual. And
Mm-hmm.
kind of so what I'm seeing around me is that people have started to develop that automatic allegiance to what Montessori is also, even before
Mm-hmm.
they get introduced to the schooling system. So it becomes
Yeah.
very natural. And I think that's one of the reasons that people around me or anyone right now feels that it's the best thing to do, at least in the early age. Um, so I would love to know about the mentorship part when you said that, right? The example that you gave. Uh,
Yeah.
so I've always been I grew up in a normal like a Catholic school, and
Mm-hmm.
there was like most of my learning used to happen from my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely we had any interaction with seniors or juniors in that way.
Right.
But in college, it was very different. When I was in university, like the seniors were so important for literally
Yeah.
everything, right? I was in engineering, so whether my majors, my minors, projects, all kind of assignments, if I had no seniors in connection, it nothing would work. And even
Right.
professors used to promote uh, more connections and more friendships. Even societies used to exist in
Yeah.
colleges to facilitate that kind of interaction between senior and juniors. So tell me more about why. And I don't think so. It's a very core part of Montessori, or is it?
It is. And it's something. The mixed age group is something that people who don't know about Montessori, if they come on tours or if they come to a talk that I'm doing, their response is usually like, "Oh wow, that seems insane." But I think I do a pretty good job of convincing them otherwise. It's one of the things, I mean, kind of what you're talking about, that Montessori realized in observing children, was exactly what you're saying, is that she would observe children, and the older children naturally on playgrounds would help younger children, or the young children would look to their elders to for help and support. And so it really is the only model of education that, at the toddler level, the classes are 18 months to 36 months, so a year and a half to three. And then primary is 3 years old to 6 years old. And then lower elementary is first through third grade, so 6 to 9. And then upper elementary is 9 to 12. And then middle school is 12 to 15. And so much of her philosophy around that was that the final year students at every level become true leaders of the classroom, and they're so honored, because they remember when they were first in these classrooms, and the mentorship they had from the oldest children. They're so honored to be given that responsibility, to be trusted to help younger students, and it varies by age group. At the toddler level, for instance, a 2.5-year-old will help a new toddler with putting their shoes on. They'll
Mhm.
help them learn how to use the bikes in the play yard. So all of these things, they'll rub their back when they're feeling sad because their mom left. And as the children get older, like in the primary classroom, for instance, there was two children yesterday, and a boy that was 4 and a girl that's almost 6, and they were doing the 1,000 chain, which is all the multiples of 10 up to 1,000. So it's academic work. And the 4-year-old this the almost 6 year old can skip count, so she was doing it really quickly, and the other boy, I could tell, was feeling almost intimidated at how fast she was going because he was counting so quickly. And then she showed him a trick of like if he put the 10 bars in front of himself and just counted them that way and then added a zero, he didn't have to work so hard. And he was so, the way he looked at her was just pure love. It was like she had just given him a pot of gold, and he looked up at her and said, "Thank you." And she was like, "You're welcome." And then they kind of hugged and they went back to work. And those moments happen every single day. I mean, I could talk exhaustively about what I observe every day between older and younger children. And when you think about it, I I really have been, someone asked me, a parent asked me this question the other day of, well, what in the world exists where only the same age of anything is supposed to do anything? And it, if you think about the world, I don't know if there is one, that there is something that other than education, traditional education, where everyone doing something is relatively the exact same age. And, as we look at education and how much it has changed in the last 10 years and how much it's going to continue to change, I really hope that this model that we are so used to becomes one that other schools start looking into, because if you have 4 year olds who are incredibly advanced academically, they can work with 6 year olds. If you have 6 year olds who aren't as advanced and need more time to grasp concepts, they can be the mentors to 4 year olds who are just learning how to read, for instance. And so it is a mutual beneficiary relationship of the younger children are getting that huge pride that comes with helping others and being purposeful and being held accountable. And the younger children are being exposed to what they will be able to do in the future. And they also have such a hero worship for people that deserve
Yeah.
that. And so it's such a beautiful thing to witness. And it, I hope, like, in traditional school, my son was a Montessori student up till 8th grade, and then he told me he wanted to go to this very rigorous boarding school, and I was like, what? It was certainly not what I ever thought he would want to do, and then he did it. And it wasn't until the seniors can apply to be freshman mentors, kind of what you're talking about in college.
Yeah.
And when he had this group of 10 freshman boys, and he would meet with them twice a week, and they would talk about anything, and he would help them, navigate. And it wasn't until around the holidays of his senior year in high school that he was like, I haven't had this feeling since I was in the elementary of like people just like loving every single word I have to say and running up to me like, what should I do? And I said, well, do you like it? He's like, I love it. It's like the best. He's like, I realized how much I missed it, that I haven't had any purpose other than just like getting good grades and doing my work. And he's like, he's like, it's the thing I look forward to the most. And that happens, every day at drop off. If a child's having a hard time, I will say, oh, but this person's waiting for you to enter the classroom. And every single time it works, because they know that they're being held accountable to something greater than them. And people have tried to convince me that it doesn't work. And I haven't yet been convinced. I will say that.
No, absolutely. I again, I was like listening to you like a beautiful, uh, and but I would love to know about the fact that these processes, how do you make it as a regular thing? Because it's very easy to do it once in a while, but make it an everyday practice needs a lot more structure. So how do you make sure that happens?
Yeah, I mean, it seems insane if you say it to anybody, people, especially people in education who only know what they've experienced either as a student themselves, or if they are a teacher, right? You have a binder with the math curriculum, and that is what you teach for the year. And so the way that we're trained to give lessons is very different than that. So it starts even before you're in a classroom. It starts in the teacher training of, like, for instance, if I'm giving a lesson to 5 year olds on phonograms, let's say, reading. And we're doing words that, let's see, we could do E, A. So the sound that makes E. Um, you're giving that lesson to a group of maybe 2 or 3 children with the movable alphabet. And that's a huge differentiator because we have tangible materials for every single concept. So it's not like a teacher standing at a board trying to make things interesting. The work itself lends itself to interest because they can touch it and see it and feel it. And the vowel sounds, for instance, are in a different color than the consonants. So the control of error is also there. But every time you sit down to give a lesson like that, let's say I'm giving a lesson to 2 5-year-olds, and this happens a lot in the classroom.
Right.
Let's say you're giving that lesson. Oh, sorry, I'm giving like a lot of feedback.
Sorry, I think.
That's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Within that lesson, you'll have 3 and 4-year-olds who either ask to watch or they just join in and they sit and they listen. And it's something during COVID actually that was talked about a great deal was how much teaching happens in indirect fashion, especially in Montessori classrooms, where if a 3-year-old is listening to that lesson on phonograms and words that make that sound, they can then think about the lesson they had earlier that day or the lesson they're going to have where they're just getting exposure to sounds. So consonants, b, k, d. But when they ask if they can do that work, right? And that happens all the time. A 3-year-old will say, "Can I do that?" And the teacher will say, "Not yet, but you can do that. As soon as you can show me that you've mastered all of these sounds, then you can do this work." So it's a natural motivator for younger children who see what is happening in the future. And because it's happening around them in the same classroom, they don't view it as intimidating or something that only 5-year-olds can do. They view it as something they get to do when they've mastered something else. And if you think about education just in general, that's what education is, right? It's like the mastery of information.
Right.
And what I think Montessori is really different in that way versus traditional education is that mastery of information can happen at really different times depending on the child. And in a school like this, it's great because once that information is mastered, they can immediately move on to the next concept. And then for the older children, they can practice the content that they've been exposed to with the younger children. And at an advanced level, like at the elementary level, this happened the other day where some of the 6th graders who are doing some pretty complex cubing work and trying to cube square, circle, and do all this cubing. And some of the younger children were really interested in what they were doing. And they don't quite have the mathematical skills to understand all of what they were doing. But when the 6th graders presented the 4th graders the work that they were doing, one of the 4th graders said, "But when can we do that?" And the boys presenting the information, they said, "Well, you have to learn all your squares and cubes up to 20. You have to have all your math facts in under 5 minutes, all the survey sheets, because if you can do those things, that means you can compute it and build all these volumes." And so that group that was listening just went off and immediately did that. And they're still working on it. So it just becomes, kind of like a think tank. There's a lot of people in this community that are either in the academia world or in the creative industry world. And so many people that when they come in and observe, talk about how our classrooms are really like what corporations and startups are trying to achieve now. They're these little small societies with people working together all for the betterment of them understanding the next concept. And it certainly is a pretty great space to exist in, either as the teacher or the children.
No, absolutely. I think the biggest flaw of K-12 is it's time bound and not mastery bound. And the problem that happens is that even if you graduate a kid at 70%, 80%, that 20% or 30% lack or knowledge gap is just going to get compounded massively every year. And within a couple of years, you'll see the kid completely lost in the classroom. And
Yeah, and that's what's so sad is usually that happens in first and second grade. There's all this data now of if your child is really slow or really fast, and between the ages of 6 and 8, they get a lot of attention. But the people that don't get the attention is everyone in between that. And so those are usually the children that suffer by the time the children are about 9,
yeah,
is that's usually the group that is behind in reading and math and everything else. Because they kind of get lost in the shuffle of they're not severe enough to need remediation, and they're not gifted enough to be considered advanced. So it's just kind of like they exist in mediocrity. And I don't know, as a parent myself, I could never live with myself if I knew that my child was just basking in mediocrity rather than reaching their full potential.
I give you another, the flip side of this is the academic mastery. A lot of people out there will be fine, if their kids are at 70%, 60%. And I also, I'm not a very pushy about grades, how much you're
Mm-hmm.
scoring. But the bigger problem is that once you start to feel that I do not know something, it's hard to accept it as a
Mm-hmm.
young child. And
Mm-hmm.
you start to look as more rebellious. You start to look as somebody who is doesn't care, because
Mm-hmm.
trying to hide their emotion of failure or emotion of not knowing by the emotion of
Yeah.
don't care. And the bigger loss is not about academic excellence. The bigger loss is about they make this shield where they don't want to look stupid if they ask trivial
Mm-hmm.
question, and their pride and the ego come into picture, and they'll do everything and anything but not ask for help. And I think that's a bigger problem that's occurring in our society in general, because
I couldn't agree more. I think it's that hiding, and the flip side to that is it's creating children who aren't curious. And I think curiosity for young people is the greatest gift that a great education can give children, because
yeah,
if children know, when children don't know something, if they believe that they can figure it out, they can do anything. To your point, if they don't know something and they're embarrassed by it, or they think of themselves as less than, right? That's just one more like shame wall. It's like, oh, I don't know that. And so if they're confident in themselves and curious and can say, wait, I don't understand that, that's really different than knowing they don't know something and being and trying to hide it. And I was just giving a parent education event this morning on the mathematical mind, and I was talking about how in my entire career of teaching for I don't know how 25 years, I have never come across a child who has been in a Montessori school from primary to elementary who has an attitude about math, who says, I hate math. Never, not one time. And I've taught hundreds, if not thousands of children. But the number of phone calls for admissions we receive, I would say almost over 90% is about children who have some sort of embarrassment or shame around some subject, whether it's reading, math. And it's to your point, it's they have had some experience that has shaped this kind of that they don't want to talk about it. And it's so sad to me because once a child reaches that stage around a subject, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's nearly impossible to bring them back from it. And I really believe that if schools were set up in a way that really lent themselves to peer relationships and not, there's a huge difference in teaching children how to be right and teaching children how to learn. And I think that's what a real Montessori school teaches children, to be curious and learn. And I believe, I know there's other schools out there that do the same. But so many schools that I've observed that have great reputations and have been around forever and are this and that. Most of the children just simply regurgitate information. And then once they get to about fourth or fifth grade, they start realizing, like, oh, this person, like, there's the gifted group and there's all of these things.
Yeah.
And I don't know what purpose that serves children because I think it just puts them into classifications that aren't necessarily beneficial for anyone. Because some of the children that have struggled the most that I have taught, what they did was develop an incredible work ethic, and they're some of the most successful people that I've ever taught. Whereas some of the children that everything was really easy for them and they got really good grades when they went on to other things have had a harder time because they didn't necessarily have to work for their outcomes, and so it really is fascinating to track all of this and learn more about what matters and essentially what matters in a classroom.
No, I absolutely agree with that. But also, I want to understand, like you mentioned about it, the academic curriculum is overlapping. So in the same
Mm-hmm.
classroom, different kids will be at different stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for clarifying that. I also would love to,
Yeah.
how can you define your parents? Like, who are those parents? If you can explain the characteristics and attributes of those parents who end up joining your school.
Oh, that's such a good question. I've taught and worked at schools in Santa Barbara, Marin County, Atlanta, and now in Los Angeles. And it's interesting because I would say about 20% of any family or parent at a Montessori school were Montessori students themselves. And
Okay.
most of them have very fond memories of it.
Hmm.
Um, at this school specifically, we have a very high number of Asian families, many of whom are very open about how they were very high achieving academics, but do not want the same experience for their children because they don't view school as something they look back at with joy. It's trauma inducing for them. So that's been really interesting to learn. We have a lot of professors in our school just because where we are in terms of our location to the Claremont colleges and then Caltech and USC, et cetera. And then we have a lot of creative types who are in the film and music business and who really value an education that isn't based on grades per se, which is it's instead based on internal motivation and growth. And so I always love. I mean, I've only worked in Montessori schools, but I love how diverse they are in terms of who the parents are, and then I also love learning more about why they're choosing Montessori. And I'm doing admissions right now for this school. And that's one of the first questions I ask parents is, why are you interested in a Montessori school for your child? And it varies a lot, but I would say what I was saying at the beginning, right now, the answer that I'm most often getting is because the values that they've read about Montessori are in parallel to what they want for their children. Um, but then, but that stayed true for every different school that I've worked in is that most of the families want their child to experience learning in a joyful, creative way. And they're really excited when they see that happening and when their children are coming home sharing their experiences. Because I think any parent, what they want for their child is for them to be curious and kind humans out in the world. And I'm really proud of the work that this school specifically does to do that because it is hard work.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Um, so that's actually interesting to know the current ideal customer profile. It does give me a lot of clarity on who are those students, who are those parents. Um, Also, I would love to
Mm-hmm.
understand, like you talk a lot about resilience and calmness, and tell me more about the LA wildfires. Like, how was that crisis? How did you saw the students' behavior or parent
Yeah.
behavior or community in general? Would love to know because that was a very
Yeah.
time.
Well, I don't know if you know, but our school actually burned down.
I
So
didn't know
that
that.
was,
So
our
sorry.
upper campus. Yeah, it did. So our upper campus, which was first through eighth grade, burned down, and our toddler through primary classrooms, where I'm seated now, did not. And then within that, I believe it was 18 families, so about 25 children with siblings also lost their homes. And what I immediately noticed, I mean, it when I look back at this year, I mean, because that was almost a year ago, it was in early January. Um, what I immediately noticed and what I was really proud of is that, for the primary classroom specifically, I had said to the entire staff, whatever we do, we have to get these classrooms reopened, because I knew for especially the youngest children how much they would need that order and routine,
Yeah.
especially the ones that had lost their homes, that they would need to be back in a classroom. So we worked tirelessly and were able to, we got all these different emergency clearances to occupy different buildings. And I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But what what happened was incredible, just because of how much this community specifically banded together. And then we were able to, the day after the fire, there was a abandoned high school for rent over in another area that's 9 miles away from this lower campus, and so we flipped that campus. It was rat infested. It was a disaster. It looked just terrible, and we were able to flip it and reopen on April 7th. So we were closed for a couple of months. But what happened was we reopened each classroom in a different location around Pasadena. So the upper elementary were at one location and the lower. And but when we all reopened and were rejoined back together, what we underestimated was simply how happy the children were to be back together with each other. And it was one of those things, we were also worried about how it was all going to work. And it worked so beautifully, simply because the children and their resilience recognized, by being apart from everyone, how special it was to be back together. And I'm proud of how resilient this community has been. And there's been a couple families who moved away who have now come back. But it certainly speaks to the important work that we're doing, and the service that this education and these classrooms provide children, because the parents were so emotional bringing their children back to school, and the youngest children. I mean, it was heartbreaking, the little 3-year-olds asking when they're going to go home again. But the parents and the children were so grateful that they were able to have this consistent experience of their classroom.
No, I'm so glad you guys could, recover from that huge loss, and
Yeah.
you came together and, showed resilience. So
Yes.
great proof of concept, I would say.
Yes.
A little silver lining to the entire tragedy. Um,
Yes.
Also, I would love to understand about the fact that let's talk about technology, right? So Montessori is more hands-on and
And
projects
mhm.
based. So how do you see right now technology coming up? Do you guys have complete no screen policy, or do you have screen for the students, or do you have technology products for the teachers? I would love to understand that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't like a sanctioned Montessori answer, but I truly believe that if Montessori were alive today, she was a big believer of looking at society and giving children lessons on how to operate in the best way in society.
Yeah.
I personally believe, and I tell this story to students. I was just telling some of them this week. Like, when I was in college, I remember my senior year, which was 1997, getting my first email address, and you had to plug it in, and it was like this big thing, and all the students were looking at me like, "What?" And the other day I showed my son floppy disks, and he
Mhm.
said to me, "But where was the cloud?" I was like, "No, you're not getting it. There was no cloud. Everything in your life had to be on this disk." But I personally believe that if Montessori were alive today, she would look at technology as like, okay, what is it about technology that is incredible that we can use as a benefit for children? And what is it that is really scary? My personal belief is that children are way too overprotected outside and underprotected inside, meaning for whatever reason, most parents believe that if your child is on an iPad in your house, they're safe. And I couldn't disagree more. Whereas very few children now can walk to the store by themselves or a bodega or any of these things that children used to do. And so I believe that Montessori would be a huge proponent of teaching children how to use technology to benefit them and others. And we at this school, I think, follow that philosophy. There are computers in the older classrooms. They're given lessons on how to use Google and how to make slide decks that are presentable and accurate and all of those things. And the children love it. I mean, they love learning about those things. What I have also realized about most children is they know how to use apps and websites. They don't know how to use Google for its intention, which was a search engine, and how to use it for research and how to use resources in a valuable way. So to help children learn those skills is really important. And I'm also really happy with the direction that education has gone. Like my son goes to Tulane in Louisiana, and every assignment he gets now, and this is not unique, he can listen to, he can read, or he can watch. And I think for technology to benefit different types of learners in that way is a perfect example of, when I was in college, you couldn't go to college if you couldn't read quickly and regurgitate information. And now with what we know of different types of learning and neurodiversity, we have learned, thank God, that there's ways that every person can learn, and it might not look the same, but technology has certainly been the answer for that. And so, I think Montessori would be so proud of those types of things. And she'd probably slap us around and tell us to, stop giving children iPads at 4. So, again, I am not a believer. People have tried to convince me of like why a child should have an iPad. And I have yet to be convinced that there's a benefit of any reason for a young child to be on an iPad. And I say to parents all the time that I can go into a classroom, and I'm not unique. I know many people like me who could do this too. And you can pick out the ones that spend a lot of time on iPads because their attention span is so incredibly short, and their inability to focus is so incredibly large. And I don't know what else to say to parents other than the time that you spent, the intentional time that you spend with your child from 0 to 6 sets the tone, for the rest of their life. And if what you're doing is handing them something to be entertained, that message will, that it's going to continue throughout their life. And I really try to help parents think about that before they just give in.
But what about the teachers? I understand that you don't have screens for the kids in the classrooms, whether it's iPad.
Yeah.
What about the teachers? How are
The
they?
teachers, yeah, the teachers have iPads, and we use something called Transparent Classroom, which is it was created by Montessorians, but so the parents now, and it has done a lot for Montessori education. The teachers take pictures of the children, and at the end of the day or the end of the week, they load up all those pictures. And so, like my child, for instance, I'll get a notification if my son was 4 that there is a notification, and it's an app that the parents can have, and they can get a picture of the child doing the work, and then they can click on the lesson they got. So if it said, for instance, like Malcolm doing the stamp game, I can click on the stamp game and see the concept that it's teaching, which is addition and hierarchy of numbers. And then I can also read about the lessons that came before that for him, and then what would be coming after for him. And that was one of the things when Transparent Classroom first came out. Montessori teachers freaked out. This is the worst. It's going to be awful. It's going to be all these things. And it's actually done the opposite because it's helped parents be informed and know more about the curriculum and understand it more. So it has been nothing but a benefit. And so I think that's a perfect example of technology really helping education and helping the exposure of Montessori education. And that there's a lot of things on the horizon now happening too with AI that I think will be
Yeah.
interesting to see in the next couple of years.
But did you guys do any training on AI for the educators?
Not yet. It's definitely. I've been teaching the teachers how to use AI because
Mhm.
I don't think many of them understand it yet, and I'm certainly not an expert. But it really is helpful for teachers. You know, for instance, if you're observing a child and they're not being successful, and you can ask AI, you know, what are the most common red flags for a 4-year-old with autism? And
Mm.
if that information can come up, and then you realize, like, oh, okay, I'm really off, or maybe I'm really on, or the same thing with IEPs and student progress. I mean, it's incredible to see what it can do. Even creating agendas for staff meetings. It's like, I want to do this for my professional development day. What would be a good outline for that? What would be a good agenda? So there's things like that that are such big time savers. And then myself and the leadership team were trying to help the teachers learn how to use AI for conference reports as well, because conference reports take so much time
Yeah.
for every child. But if you can take all of your observation notes and put that into like a beautiful formatted template that is, you know, it's a game changer. So it will be interesting to see what comes out of that in the next couple of years in terms of education and AI, especially for young children. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Alpha School, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's been interesting to just know about and read about their successes and failures.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think they are hitting the chord on the right on quite a few things, whether it's personalized education or using AI for that. But of course, the impact is too early to judge, so it
Yeah.
will take time. And I understand. I think every experiment needs to be given enough time frame, especially in education,
Hmm.
before
Hmm.
you accept it or discard it. So I
Yeah.
always believe that thanks to those early adopters who take a part.
Hmm.
Otherwise, no innovation in education is possible.
Hmm.
Okay, so there's also one thing that we do at these podcasts. There's a question that has been passed on to you by the last speaker
Oh, okay.
without knowing you personally. So there's a question
Oh, okay.
they wanted to know answer for. So whatever you tell me, I'll pass it on back to them, and then I'll ask you
Oh,
also.
amazing.
Give me a question. So the question that I had was, how do you get students to use metacognitive skills? Or in other words, he wanted to know how you get them to start thinking.
About their thinking. That's a
Yes.
great question. Um, you know, I would say in Montessori schools, that is the ultimate goal, is to
Yeah.
help children think from the very earliest age. And again, I don't know enough about how other teachers are trained to be teachers.
Hmm.
I can only speak to my own training, but in the Montessori training, and I know that it is very specific to Montessori, we learn so much about the characteristics of children at certain ages that the curriculum is written for children to learn how to think. So, for instance, children from 6 to 12, they have a reasoning mind, meaning they want to know how everything works, and they'll ask all the sorts of whys and how questions. They
Hmm.
also are very interested in working in groups. They also have a strong commitment to justice, which is why they're such tattletailers. They
Hmm.
also, Montessori called that age the age of rudeness, because it's when children start trying out lots of different behaviors to see how people react to them. But the biggest thing when I was in the classroom, the biggest gift I realized I had been given was that children to get them to think, you have to engage their imagination. And so, for instance, a lesson was given this morning on the mathematical mind, that we give to children as young as 7, that you say, have you ever wondered? And that's when you start a lesson to children with, have you ever wondered? It immediately engages them, because what they normally want to do is prove you wrong.
Hmm.
But if you start a lesson, say, have you ever wondered why a circle has 360 degrees?
Hmm.
And they'll come up with all sorts of blah, 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 blah. But then when you tell them the story of the Babylonians and the stargazers who laid there for years and mapped out the sky, and how they realized that about every 360 days, the sky would go back to the time that it was 360 days ago, and you tell that story to children, they can't believe it. And then you thank the Babylonians and you thank them for giving you the gift of the circle. But what they do immediately, and I've given that lesson so many times, is they go and research it, and what they find, and you purposely don't give them all the information, because you ask them questions like, I wonder if you could find out more. I wonder if there's more about this and this. And when you do that and you engage their imagination, all they want to do is tell you everything they've found out. But most education is sit and get, and you're just telling students like the Babylonians made a circle and blah, 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 and they don't care.
Hmm.
And so I think that is the greatest gift, kind of what I was talking about before. If you want children to be curious, you have to teach them in a way that breeds curiosity and engenders that in everything they do. And it's really hard to be a great Montessori teacher, because you have to be humble. If
Yeah.
you knew everything and you just told children the answers to everything all the time, all you're doing is they just sit there and go great. But
Yeah.
if you give them enough that it sparks their interest and then they run with it, that's the gift of a master teacher. Because when you are sitting there and you look in your classroom and the children are doing that in one way or another, it is just teaching them how to learn. And that feeling, it goes back to what you were saying. If you do that for children, they realize that there's nothing that they can't learn, that some things might be harder and some things might be easier, but all of it is possible. And when you're existing in that state, there's no better place to be.
No, and I love those answers. I'll definitely pass it on. Any question that you have
Okay.
for the next speaker that you want to know?
Yeah, that's a great um, question. I mean, can I email you a question? Would
Yeah,
that work
absolutely,
if I think about
absolutely.
it? Okay. Yeah, I'll think
Okay.
about it, because I think I know, but I want to think about it. I want it to be really good.
Love it. But yeah, I think this has been fantastic overall.
Okay.
Learned so much about Montessori. I knew about it, but I think it's never enough. And thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your insights.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I'm a big believer. I think leadership starts, leadership doesn't know age, leadership doesn't know the influence of the age groups. So I think cross age
Yeah.
leadership is definitely the way to go. And even if those schools who's listening to this podcast, even if they do not have a official Montessori school, they can still do projects or after school
Oh,
activities
yeah.
which are in a group settings. So
Yeah.
it's also hard to engage different age group kids. So we use a lot of games, in our case, digital games, which
Hmm.
students can actually play together. And
Yeah.
in those cases, the barrier of age actually gets quite faded, especially when you are in a game setup. So
Hmm.
yeah, thank you so much for
Sure.
sharing
Yeah,
your
of course. Thank you
wisdom
for
with us.
having me.